Peace, peace, peace. What's going on, family? Welcome to another episode of the most revolutionary radio show on the airwaves. I am Asad Malik, and this is United Black America Radio. And before I get started, let me greet the family as I always do with Hotep to my Kemites. Assalamu alaikum to my brothers and sisters in Islam. Black power to the Panthers, both new and true. Salute and honors to the Moors, Ashe and Uhuru, to all my long-lost relatives on the continent. God bless, give thanks, and what's up to everybody else. This is the radio show that I wish I had when I first came into Black consciousness, and the reason is we give you the information that you can use to live a Black conscious lifestyle and to take action in the face of white supremacy. Our battle against white supremacy right now is the most important battle that we can fight. I mean, each and every day you turn on the TV, you log on to the internet, and you see our brothers and sisters being the victims of police brutality, or lynchings, as they should be more appropriately called. Every day you read statistics about how the Black community is being destroyed. And by Black community, I mean the diaspora. I'm not talking about just here in the United States and the Caribbean. All over the planet, melanated people, the original people, so-called Black men. We face the same threat of extermination from the system of white supremacy. And that's why I say that white supremacy is the most important battle that we can fight. This battle to wake our people up, this battle to liberate our people, this battle to set our people free is predicated upon our ability to separate ourselves from and ultimately destroy the influence that white supremacy has over us. And so we bring together the best minds in our community to make this one of the most impactful programs anywhere. And I listen to a lot of programs. A lot of time it's all entertainment and very little education. And while there are a few shows that I look up to, I don't think you can find the quality of information that we deliver here anywhere else. And that's demonstrated by today's master teacher, Ashra Kwesi. So let's go ahead and get into today's interview. For more than 3 decades, our guest today has served our community as a historian, an interpreter of our cultural heritage, and a leader in the field of chematology. He was one of the premier students of our ancestor, Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan, and is hailed by many, including myself, as one of the top spiritual mentors in the conscious community. So this interview's been a long time coming, and it is with great pleasure that I roll out the red, black, and green carpet for our master teacher, Ashra Kwesi. Welcome to United Black America Radio, brother.
Hotep, my brother. It's an honor to be on United Black America, and also thank you, Asante, for the introduction.
It's much deserved, and it doesn't do you credit because you've been in our community for a long time, leading, teaching, serving, feeding the people, and despite your very distinguished portfolio, when we step outside of the conscious community, many of our brothers and sisters in the so-called African-American community, they're unaware that scholar warriors like yourself walk amongst us. And so I think I want to start off this interview by going all the way back to the beginning. How did Ashra Kwesi manifest? How did you come into consciousness?
Well, I think that has to go, how did I actually come into consciousness of white supremacy? Coming into consciousness of our African identity, I think we're looking at 2 different periods. I think coming into consciousness of the fact that living in white supremacy system, I think I have to go back to my early childhood in terms of seeing how the oppression, how we as a people are afflicted by oppression, how social workers, white social workers came into our community and literally stripping families of their children because the mothers went to work trying to make more money. They didn't get enough money on welfare system. So because they went to work and then, the white social workers found out that the mother may have gone to work and actually witnessing social workers, in my neighborhood going to families' house, taking their children away while the mother's screaming and hollering and the children are crying. That was my first identity relating to exactly what I lived in. And, of course, my family not having enough money to support. My mother equally had to go out to work. My father been a victim of the Korean War. Okay, so that became a very paranoid state in terms of seeing that this could actually happen to us, knowing the fact that my mother equally had to go out and work. And so that made me become very aware of the enemies of our people at a very early age and consciousness of the white supremacy system that we lived in. In terms of what I'm doing now, how did I come to lecture taking groups back to Africa? Then I have to go back to 1973 at Long Beach State and hearing a man named Dr. Yosef Ben-Yakinen that we affectionately know as Dr. Ben.
That's right.
And he gave a very powerful lecture that day on African history and African spirituality, religion. And I never heard the spirit, the lecture and the information that he gave, especially on the level that he gave it with the feeling and the connection. And just detailing, in his own spirited way. I mean, he would one point he would have you mad, and another point he'd have you sad and glad. So all the emotions were shaken in me that day. After Dr. Ben's lecture, I asked him, Dr. Ben, can you prove what you said here today? And he said, young man, I can take you back and show you. That's the first time someone told me that they can actually show me. He said, but above all, we need young black men like you to return back to Africa to do the field research. And he walked away. So that became a dream at that point to return back to Africa. And I think the impact of the necessity of returning back came in 1975 when my friend was killed by the Gestapo-beast LAPD on the way to the Hollywood Bowl. So that showed me that there was no guarantee that we were going to live out our whole life actually seeing my friend's life being taken. And my anger, I wanted to go into revolutionary suicide. Literally, just, hey, if they're killing us, then I felt that we should get out there and take care of some of that business ourselves. If they're going to kill us, then then we shouldn't stand by and let this happen.
That's right.
Well, because of that anger, a young lady gave me a book called Black Man of the Now. And I thought it was a Bible what she was giving me. And I said, the last thing I need is a Bible. And she said, no, this is not a Bible. I think that this might help you get through what you're going through right now. And when I started reading the book, it was a sacred holy text, Black Man of the Now and his family. And at that time, Dr. Benny has the whole 4,200 miles of the Now on that cover of that book that he printed in 1972. And reading that book, that's what really put me in the spirit to return back. I said, I heard this man a couple of years ago at Long Beach State. Well, to make a long story short, I made that journey in 1981. And little did I know at that time that I would travel 14 years. I would dock in Kemet, that is now called Egypt today, as well as Sudan, that our ancestors referred to as Kush. And returning to the highlands of Ethiopia with him in 1983 when he actually visited his family, where Dr. Ben is, he is Beta Israel, or is called today Falasha,
That's
in
right.
the Gundar village. And one of his favorite quotes from the ancient papyrus of Hunefer, that we came from the beginning of the Nile, where God happily dwelled at the foothill of the mountain of the moon, that being Kilimanjaro and Rwenzori. Kilimanjaro on the Kenyan side, Rwenzori on the Ugandan side. So returning to the foothill of the mountain of the moon with him, beginning of the Nile, that was back in 1983 as well. So that's been now 34 years nonstop. I haven't missed a year in 34 years, 14 years with that Grandmaster teacher, Dr. Ben. So that's a short synopsis of to the question, how did I get started? So it's I can't even believe that over 3 decades have gone by. But of course, when you're doing something that you love to do and
That's
you're
right.
on a mission, you get in a kind of like a time warp.
That's right. That's right. Going back to a statement that you discussed earlier, talking about your friend being killed by the LAPD. Of course, we've seen a non-stop siege, a non-stop war being waged on us in the streets by police officers. And, we still see that today. I mean, do you still have the same raw feelings that you have when you see things like our brother Eric Garner, our brother Mike Brown, our brother Trayvon Martin, and all of our other brothers and sisters being killed in the streets? Do you still have that raw emotion? Because a lot of our brothers and sisters are seeing this, and some of us resort to a frozen psychological state. Others are filled with a righteous anger that makes them want to get out and do something. And again, like you said, commit revolutionary suicide. So, how should we be responding to that? Before we get on to the topic of African spirituality and consciousness, I really want to touch on that topic because it's a big issue in our community right now.
Brother, every time it happens or every time I see that on the news, I'm enraged. In fact, I'm enraged right now just watching this afternoon where the Gestapo ran the brother down. Ran
50 miles
and
an
put
hour.
his knee into him and shot him. Yeah, and then another, put his and shot him in the back. That's like we saw with Oscar Grant in Oakland, or Amity Diallo 47 times.
That's
that
right.
anger comes back to me over and over again. And I hate to see the intellectual debates over this, because if this was happening to any other ethnic group, there would not be any intellectual debate
That's right.
over this issue. Okay, we have to tell the truth, okay? The men would rise up and fight. We see that in all people, okay? And even back in 1970, because I was a victim, okay, at that time, a friend was the victim because he was actually killed. I carried the scars on my head thinking that
That's
my
right.
brains were going to be blown out at that day. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that the only way this is going to stop is black man who's got to raise up. As Malcolm said, we're afraid to bleed. Okay, this is the real reality. I mean, it's clear that we're being killed indiscriminately. We see that this is nothing but the Neil plantation in operation.
That's right.
Instead of the rope, it's the bullet. Okay, we're still in the crossfires. Okay, we're still being crucified every day. So this is the real reality that we have to look at, is that, it's an all-out war. And let's look at it from a global perspective. We have to look at the fact that when you look at black people all over the planet Earth, okay, you see that they have been totally wiped out, okay, genocide. If we look at Tasmania, and see that
That's
every
right.
last one of those Tasmanians have been totally exterminated, all right? So history rewards all research, and unfortunately we don't have a global perspective in looking at our situation here. What is the objective? What is the plan? Keep in mind that these Europeans got a plan for when the so-called new millennia, I say so-called because this is not 2015. We're just adhering to the white supremacy time
That's
period.
right.
Okay,
That's right.
They just count time down and then start up. But in reference to that time period when the so-called new millennium rolled around, and I noticed on the news they kept referring to this new millennium society. And I said, what is this new millennium society? White folks are planning for the next 1,000 years.
That's
So
right.
the question is, okay, are they planning for us to be here? Are we planning and making sure that, we're going to have control of our own destiny? These are the things that we've got to look at, and seeing that what we see today is the plan, okay, to exterminate black folks. This is what we've got to, this is the real reality that we have to look at. My son-in-law, who in his yard, out watering his yard, okay, with my grandson, okay, by his side, okay, and here the Gestapo, LAPD roll up on him with AK-47s. Now, wait a minute, he's in his yard. There's no white cop going to roll up in the white neighborhood
That's right.
and point the gun at a white male with his white son on his side. Okay?
That's right.
This has been done. I mean, we see it. We see the killings every day. Okay? But we don't hear about these kind of cases where the trigger hair, he's got his finger on the trigger, totally disrespect. We don't see it, the fact of how black women equally are being stopped, okay, and totally disrespected, and even to the point where they may not survive either. Just like we saw the case out on the freeway.
True indeed.
Where this white Gestapo literally beating the sister, okay, with this hand full fist. This is totally disrespect. There's no race, okay, outside of America that we would see this happening. When we see things going on around the world and so forth, and we see how other black folks are fighting back on the African continent, or whether we look at outside the African continent, and that is due to the atrocities that this country has inflicted upon them, and they
That's
are
right.
fighting back. That's the real reality. Whether it's the taking of their natural resources, or taking or trying to outright exterminate them, to even take over the land. This has been the MO of Europeans. And this is something that we don't want to look at. The fact that this country is here today is because the natural resources, they wanted this land, and the human resource to make it happen is us, and now it's the natural resources of Africa. We're looking at AIDS today, and now we're walking around thinking that AIDS came out of nowhere. White folks created AIDS. Why is AIDS in the areas of where you have the highest natural resources on the African continent?
That's right.
Why do we see AIDS in areas like in South Africa, okay, where they know that whites are the minority there, so how are they going to reduce that? And why is it that our people are the ones that got the AIDS in South Africa?
That's
or
right.
whether we're looking at Uganda, or whether we're looking at Tanzania, all the areas that you got the highest natural resources is where you have the highest AIDS count. As the Honorable Marcus Garvey told us in his book, The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. What did he say in his book? The number one thing we had to watch out for was scientific annihilation. And because we haven't studied these great prophets, African prophets like him, now we are walking around in a daze like, what is going on? It's right in our face. I mean, for that brother right the other day, shot down in the back, right in our face. It's like, it's like the spirit of the ancestors say, what are you going to do, black man? That's the question now. It's obvious now that they're out to really, to exterminate us. We are in the way. We don't realize that. And the only way this is going to stop and we're going to get respect is a black man who has got to rise up, retaliate back. So, of course, you can see that emotion is still in me when I start talking about this particular area, brother. It's like I live it all over again.
Right, and it should be in all of us. I mean, how can you see something that happens to one member of the diaspora and not have any feelings, not elicit any emotion? Because what happens to one of us in the diaspora affects all of us in the diaspora. It sets a precedent for white supremacy, and if they think they can get away with it over there, they'll damn sure bring it to our shores. And something else interesting that you discussed, and I was just doing some research on this yesterday, in talking about scientific annihilation and the way that white supremacy weaponizes biological agents. There were reports that have just been declassified and surfaced that said the white apartheid movement in South Africa researched ways to create viruses to specifically attack the black gene.
Right, you're absolutely right, brother. We are living what we saw in science fiction movies yesterday is real today.
That's right.
Because what we saw in those science fiction movies is what they were planning, and they generally put it in their movies first. So when we look at all these areas of viruses and all these particular things that are going on, this is all part of their MO. If we are picked up, if a black man is picked up, and because he's accused of robbing a bank, okay, and he is sent to prison, okay, let's say he does time and he gets out. And he does not want to go back to prison. But he just happens to be in the area where a bank is robbed, but he didn't rob the bank. Now, the question is he going to jail? Yes. Why is he going to jail? Because they say he's got an M.O., all right? His M.O. from his record tells him that he's a bank robber. Is that correct? Well, why can't we use that same analogy? Why can't we, if we look at white folks' M.O., okay, you got an M.O., you put smallpox on Native Americans' blankets, okay, to wipe them out. Okay, so you got an MO of this. You got an MO of exterminating people. You got an MO of dropping hydrogen bombs on the Melanesian islands in the South Pacific, okay, to use their island for a test ground and put them back on it to see what the radiation and leukemia would happen to them. Okay, you got a record of literally killing millions of our people on the African continent. You got a record of enslaving our people on the African continent. You got a record all over the planet Earth where you have gone. You got a record of exterminating people. So how can we look at these white folks' record and think that we're safe here?
True indeed.
If we look at that MO, and this is a real reality that we have to look at. Keep in mind that we don't know what has been said in behind closed doors. Okay, right. We don't know what's been said behind closed doors and said, okay, now it's time to step it up. Okay, with the killing of black men, we need to step it up. Okay, maybe It's been going on all along, but now you got the technology of cameras and all these things and people recording it. And I know that a lot of the talk shows and so forth are responding for what they're seeing in these these cameras and so forth. And it's good that people have filmed these things.
That's right.
Okay, there's reports that we haven't even gotten. Even in 1975, when my friend got killed, just in that year, there were over 800 black men who were killed just in that year. Now, from January up to now, we're talking about 2015, there's been over 300 black men killed since they have been recording it from January to now. Now, when CNN came out, and just this one point here, I think this is very important. CNN came out 2 years ago. All right, now CNN, this is white media news, came out and said that more black men die in America, killed in America, than in the Iraq and Afghanistan war put together.
True
now,
indeed.
That tells us something, right? That means that we're at war.
True indeed. True indeed. Statistics I pulled up last night from 1882 to 1968, 3,446 black men, women, and children were lynched. Now, of course, that's on the record. We know a lot of those lynchings went unreported.
Right, there were brothers who were burned, we never found,
right.
and buried, and, those are unaccounted for.
That's right. Since 2005, more than 5,000 black men, women, and children have been killed by the police. So the numbers that we have since 2005 alone far exceed the numbers of black men, women, and children who were lynched from 1882 to 1968. So
right.
That should tell us something as well. And we are indeed at war. But I believe a large number of our people don't respect that fact. Because, we're
living an illusion of inclusion. That's the reason it. I mean, that's the reason why. I mean, we're kept with things to do so we don't have time to think. So there's all kind of trinkets. People are being hypnotized. Most people are looking down at devices now, okay? That's where they spend most of their world at, looking at devices now. There's another young man out in L.A., Brother Siddiqui Bakari. He got a,
that's right. I know
Brother
Bakari very well.
Yes, I mean, I think he's ahead of his times. You got a piece on transhumanism to show how to move the whole human spirit and emotion out of ourselves to transmit that into technology. And by doing that, it will numb us to anything that will happen to us.
True indeed.
If we understand that. And then it becomes just an intellectual debate. It just becomes the whole, a debate about the issue instead of us mobilizing around our communities and making sure that we retaliate when these kind of things take place. And that's the real reality.
True indeed. A lot of our brothers and sisters outside of the community, they have no idea what they would even be fighting for. If they picked up arms today and fought, they wouldn't know what they were fighting for. And it's because a large part of our cultural heritage has been lost. And so education and religion are two of your areas of focus. And we're a spiritual people. I think the enemy knows this, and they've used that as a weapon against us. So can you start talking a little bit about how Western civilization hijacked African spirituality and started to turn it against us?
Yes, the African spirituality, that's the essence of us as an African people. But unfortunately, the enemy became the deity in the spiritual subconscious of our mind. And what I mean is that the natural spiritual essence of us, that's a natural spiritual way of life, okay? Some say it's that African spirituality is that they have used against us to make us so complacent. But in terms of how the enemy became the deity and the European bringing of their Christianity, okay, on Africa, this is where they brought this whole Serapis Jesus that was created at the conference of Nicene in 325 AD. Literally created as a corruption of African spirituality that was started in the fallopian tube of the Happy Now in the first place. Starting with going back to Asar, the whole spiritual salvation of the Asarian drama, the crucifixion of Asar by his evil brother named Set, okay? But yes, going back to the African goddess Aset, okay, who resurrects him, okay, from the dead, okay, literally with her neter Ankh, or divine life. That means through her womb. That's the symbol of the Ankh, which is life. Knowing the uterus and the symbolism of the uterus and knowing the anatomy of the body, that's why they use that symbol. So Here we see that the Neter Ankh, which is divine life, is going to come back, and he's going to come back through his son and Aset's son, Haru. So here we see the whole spiritual story of salvation and resurrection that the Europeans corrupted from ancient African spirituality. Asar being the perfect black, the Lord of the perfect black. Now, another thing that Europeans did to us is take away our divinity. It's that black divinity that they saw on the African temples and tombs. Asar, as I said, he was the Neb. He was the Lord of the perfect black. Okay, so seeing that the black divinity was part of the essence of our spirituality. And by creating this spiritual enslavement, what the Europeans did, came in and created a whole white angelical realm, a white divinity on us, and made us believe that God was white. When you look at the whole angelical realm, you see a white male God represented, and you see the white Jesus and the white angels.
That's right.
So this became part of the whole killing of African people's spirit, to the point where we, in the subconscious of some of our people, we have demonized ourselves, that we wanted to be as close to whites as we possibly could because we wanted to make it into that white heaven, because that's what we've been taught to believe, that we were demons and devils. And through this, through the Ham story and through the many biblical accounts and things that they created, and to a certain extent, this is where many of our people are at, especially those who still got a white Jesus up on the church windows and forth, stained glass windows, okay? I mean, every time you turn around, when you see a black man, when he does shoot a police, he's always shot in the leg or the foot. You know, I mean, what is it? Does he see and look into the white cop's face, and then he sees a white Jesus, and then all of a sudden, what happens to his spirit in that process when that's been planted deeply in his psychic, okay, that the enemy is the deity? I mean, it happens all the time. So again, this is the part of where they took away our divinity. They took away our spiritual representation of seeing our own black God consciousness, our own black spiritual consciousness. This is what they saw in the temples and tombs when they came in there plundering and robbing and chiseling out for many things. And this is what Dr. Ben and his many works that he put out, you know, our black seminarians and black clergy without the black theology. He challenged this straight up.
That's right.
In his writings. All right, the African origin of major Western religions. Okay, he challenged the Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Okay, many of these ideas. Okay, that without African spirituality and the foundation of African spirituality, none of these religions would exist. We should be the last people fighting among ourselves over Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Okay, when in fact the foundation of it started with us. And if one is practicing one of those religions, if it's not coming from a black theology and a black divinity, we should get rid of it because it's increasing our spiritual enslavement.
So in light of this knowledge, should Christians leave the church? Should Muslims,
Well, I think that what brothers were doing back in the day, when we go back to the time of Richard Allen, and we go back to the time where they were sending us a message, okay? When you go back to the institutions that they were building, Prince Hall didn't call the lodge Prince Hall, he called it the African Lodge, okay? When many of those brothers, they were talking about a black Jesus. So they were more in touch with their black divinity than we are today. So I think that, and some black folks don't even know that the acronym for the African Methodist Episcopal Church is African. All right.
That's right.
So the point is that if they were taking us back to that consciousness in the 1800s, then why haven't we got to our own institutions to express our own spirituality and our own black divinity in those institutions? Okay. The reason is because the Negro church is still controlled by the white church. Okay, that's, as I said, Dr. Ben's book, are Black Seminarians and Black Clergy Without a Black Theology, are Black Seminarians, because they are still go to a white cemetery school or seminary school, okay, to learn a white theology. So that preacher is sent back to our community to teach us in their services, okay, to how to worship white folks. So in turn, we get caught into white idolatry. And that is the worship of white images. That is an eternal enslavement. All right. So this is where once, the slave fights like a dog. Okay. You have trained your dog. You have fed your dog. Okay. Your dog is not going. You could take him on the other side of town because you're tired of this dog. You take him on the other side of town. That dog will sniff his way back and find you. All right. The same thing with the slave. The slave wants this illusion of inclusion. He wants to be close to his master. He wants his master to be with him.
He wants to be integrated into his master's house.
Integrated into his life. He wants to be accepted as one of him, and that is not. And the slave has not understood that. No matter how much he kills his family, okay, and still expresses the hate that he has for him. Okay, he's been trained. That's what slavery has done to some of our people. That trained us like animals, okay, to love that master no matter what. And the religion, his white supremacy Christianity, played a major role in that enslavement to this very day. And that's why I call it how the enemy became the deity in the spiritual subconscious of our mind. And it's played out every day of our life. So this is something that when we start to deal with these things that we talked about a few minutes ago, okay, why we can't have a mental break, okay? We want white folks, the very people that kill us, to be in the intellectual debate and discussing how they kill us.
That's right.
So these are areas that we have to challenge, okay? There are many pieces to this, okay? And not one of us, and I sure don't, have the piece.
That's
okay?
right.
We have, as I call it, the eye in the broken glass syndrome. And meaning what that is, I use the analogy of a mirror you put it up to your face, you can see your face. But if someone knocks that mirror out your hand on the ground, it breaks up into many pieces. But if you pick up one of those little pieces, you can't see your face anymore. You see a piece of your face. So it takes many of us to pick those pieces back up again, and no matter what your interest is, that interest must be for your people. So as Dr. Clark said, peace be upon him, take what you do best and do it for your people. And then we take the piece and respect those who have mastered their particular area and reconstruct the image of us again.
True indeed, true indeed. And we teach within our organization that according to Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's book, The ISIS Papers, we fight on many different masterpiece, absolutely. We fight on many different battlefields: economics, education, entertainment. Our microphone can be just as much a weapon as a gun. Labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and warfare. Black relationships are revolutionary in and of themselves. Those are our battlegrounds. Absolutely right. So we've got
to have a peripheral vision in this fight.
That's right.
Like Asar, he holds the spirituality of, I was talking about the black divinity in the early creation story of Africa. Keep in mind the African creation story, as we were talking right before the radio station, was based off of the African god and goddess, as well as the African man and the African woman. That's that spiritual dialectical laws of opposites that our ancestors saw. Whereas the Western world, you don't have that spiritual dialectical laws of opposites. But Asar, the perfect black, he holds the crown, the ostrich crown. And the reason why they use the ostrich crown, okay, to represent the ostrich bird, the zoop type, is not about worshiping animals, but how the ostrich bird can look almost like 360 degrees. So by looking at 360 degrees, that's how we have got to look as a people. 360 degrees to deal with white supremacy and to relieve us from this spiritual enslavement. So that's how, using that analogy of the ostrich bird, that's what we've got to do in terms of so many different fronts, as you just said yourself, that we have to deal with.
True indeed. True indeed. And, I was going to move on to Islam and Judaism, but I want to sit here for a second because a lot of people will look at the symbology that's represented on the walls of Kemet, on those temple walls and in the scrolls, and they'll interpret those things literally rather than metaphorically, as they should, I believe, be interpreted. Can you speak on that?
Well, again, there's Kemet. You had exoteric interpretations of the Medu Neter. The Medu Neter, the sacred language of God, divine speech, that the Greeks refer to as the hieroglyphics. And, of course, there's different periods, okay, as Petrie refers to as a so-called pre-dynastic, okay, and then you have the Old Kingdom. Well, when, in fact, this is all a continuity of time, of African time here.
That's right.
But in terms of how they have it broken down in pre-dynastic, Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, and Late Kingdom, okay, in this particular period. So in all those periods is what I'm trying to say, they wrote, okay, they wrote the Medu Neter, whereas the New Kingdom, okay, could not read the Old Kingdom. That's how much time span we're looking at here. There's an area that I take our groups, an area called Kolobolo, okay, in Ta-Nehisi, or what is referred to as Nubia today. And here we show animals on rocks like elephants and giraffes. Now, you know, elephants and giraffes could not live in Egypt today.
That's right.
So that tells us that there were elephants and giraffes there, because why are they carved on these stones here? Okay, I mean, clearly carved all these different kind of animals, showing that was a grassland prior to it being a desert. But in any case, there's early writing here that they have not been able to interpret that writing. So here we see early African writing, whether we're looking at the Siberian 1 or 2. We're talking about 250,000 years ago. So here we have this early writing. But all this writing is an expression of what? What our ancestors, these curly-haired priests, observed for countless thousands of years, and that's Mut-Netchet. Mut-Netchet is Mother Nature. And expressing that whole divine speech out of the forces of Mut-Netchet itself, that came to be the Medu Neter, known as divine speech. So it's a writing system that our ancestors had a esoteric as well as exoteric interpretation. There could be an outer view for common people to understand, but there's a deeper inner spiritual meaning that the priests understood in the Medu Neter. But in any case, there are concepts, especially in the New Kingdom, that were literally plagiarized from those monuments and temples that are used today in these religions. For instance, if I was to say Septepen-Ra. Septepen-Ra, you see it everywhere on the temple, Septepen-Ra. Septepen-Ra means chosen by God. So you see that the Nesu, or the king, he is the Nesu, okay, Septepen-Ra. That means he's the king that is chosen by God. He is also the Sa-Ra, okay, he's the Nesu Sa-Ra, all right, that means he's the king who is the son of God. So where do you hear these terms at? He's also the Nesu Neb-Kadu, okay, which means Lord, King of Kings. Now, where have you heard these terms, King, Lord, King of Kings, Sa-Ra, okay, and Septepen-Ra from? Where have you heard these from?
It's Jesus. That's the representation of Jesus in
Christianity. You see it in Revelations. In Revelations, you hear the whole idea of Neb-Kadu, Lord, King of Kings.
That's right.
Okay, Jesus is referred to as the Son of God. That was taken from the Sa-Ra. Okay, and also Judaism, chosen by God, the chosen children of God. Okay, Septepen-Ra.
That's right.
They literally copied these ideas from that ancient Medu Neter. And it's through studying the Medu Neter we can see how the Western version of their religions and other ideas in their Western civilization was literally plagiarized from ancient spiritual ideas that took countless thousands of years for our ancestors to develop. And when we go through these various holidays and all these kind of things, a lot of this is expressed all the time. But it's expressed through white idolatry, and we have been brainwashed. A lot of our people have been brainwashed to believing these religious counts as actual things that took place.
That's right.
And this is the sad thing. This is where, literally black folks have become zombies, okay? Especially during these, one of their highest Christian holidays of the Easter, the Salvation, especially Salvation, because most black folks thinking that that's when they do everything to give up all their money, generally on Easter Sunday, to make sure that they get into a white heaven and a white angelical realm for that salvation. Or whether it's the birth of the European Serapis Jesus in December, all this is literally based off of cosmic events that our ancestors observed for thousands of years, as well as solar around the sun, as well as stellar events around the stars and lunar events around the moon, which is I do a whole talk on, as well as presentations, which is would be too in depth to even talk on, but just giving you a basic synopsis of what I'm trying to say here.
That's right.
But unfortunately, Kemet, and many people say, well, why do you deal with Kemet, Kwesi? Well, see, is Dr. Ben, he's the one that took us back back to the Teneter land. Okay, he's the one that said, look to the Nile. His father himself telling him to look, okay, when he took him to his special library and took the key off of his neck and unlocked that sacred library, the sacred writings. And even though he was raised a Hebrew, he told him he has to return back to the Nile, that he is now old enough to learn where the original religions came from. Okay, and that's when he made his journey back to the Nile, back to Egypt. Now, Egypt, because of the monuments and temples, okay, we're talking about this knowledge carried from inner Africa. Everything that you see on those temples and the zoop types and the many spiritual ideas, all those animals, you don't see them in Asia. You don't see them in Saudi Arabia. You don't see them in Mesopotamia. You don't see them in Europe. Those animals on those temples and zoop types and ideas that they're using all are coming from Africa.
True indeed.
When I was in Uganda just last year, there were many ideas that are there that I was able to witness carved in stone to clearly show how our ancestors, it took countless thousands of years to carry these spiritual ideas where it reached its zenith and Kemet. And literally, as our ancestors migrated, carried some of those spiritual ideas up out of Africa and carried it to India and carried it to Asia. So when we see Krishna and Buddha, all of that is a copy from the ancient African spirituality.
True indeed.
The same idea, whether we're looking at Krishna and Yogiki and his mother and the Madonna form holding him, as well we're looking at Buddha, the same ideas. Or Quetzalcoatl all the way over here in the Americas. Okay, that's why that Happy Now is the fallopian tube. That's the beginning, coming up out of Africa, way inner Africa. So this is why it's important that we, as Dr. Ben told me years ago, that we need people to go back and do the field research. The field research.
That's right.
Not put our ego in it. Okay, but go back and start to do the work, because Europeans are over there tearing up Africa. They're over there tearing up sacred places and sacred ground. I couldn't go to England or Greece and these places and say I'm on an archaeological dig to dig up. No, that's not going. They're not going to let me take one shovel to take one piece of dirt up out that ground. So why do they come and dig and plunder?
That's right. We were talking to Professor Manu on Pim a few episodes ago, and he discussed his Save Nubia project, because it turns out that the Arab-controlled government of northern Sudan is flooding the south of Sudan. And in doing so, we're losing treasure troves worth of artifacts and pieces of our cultural heritage. And even in Egypt today, and I mean Egypt literally, not Kemet, but Egypt as it's been named by its Arab occupants, we have the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. We have Islam running rampant. They've threatened to start destroying our relics and our cultural artifacts, just as they've done throughout the Middle East, ISIS and other groups like that, really fundamental Islamist groups. And so, with that being said, many of our brothers and sisters, they'll leave Christianity and they'll move into Islam. They'll leave Christianity and they'll become Hebrew Israelites, rather than returning to the root from which all these branches sprang.
Well, brother, see, in the making of a lamb, in the lamb mentality, when they made us, if I can use the analogy, I don't know if it's a good one or not, okay. But, in the making of the lamb mentality, okay, and then when the lamb awakens to the wolf, okay, he may not know exactly where to go, okay, until he awakens to the fact that who he really is, that he is not a lamb, okay, that he is a warrior, okay, he is the falcon, okay. This is, it's not, when many of us emerge out of Christianity, and if I use myself as an analogy, for example, okay, I did not know what I know all the time. Of course, when I met Dr. Ben, that awakened my thinking, my consciousness, okay, as we all have our African spirituality within us lying dormant for the most part.
That's right.
But it has to be awakened, and most of it is through denial and the hatred of self that it cannot awaken. So, of course, when those awakenings periods started taking place, and myself going through the various vicissitudes trying to find myself, and even hearing the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad and the teaching of the black man is God. Okay, I was very receptive to that, because I was looking for that. I was looking for a black theology, okay, and the teachings, okay, the message to the black man, okay, and the Yaku story. That was a good story. It was better than the Ham story. okay,
True indeed.
that we were inflicted with. So that was a good story. And then even meeting Khalid Abdul Muhammad, who became a good friend of mine. I knew him as Rashidin back in the day when he would teach it in Crenshaw in L.A. on the Black Dot. And at the same time, but his son and my daughter went to the same school, Marcus Garvey School in Los Angeles. So we would talk all the time.
You're talking about Khalid Abdul Muhammad's son?
Yes, Brother Kafani. Now he's grown now, right? But he and my daughter went to the same school, in Marcus Garvey School, right? So so I would see Brother Khalid when he would come pick up his son, and I'm coming to pick up my daughter. So because of the teachings of Khalid was so powerful, I was about to join the Nation of Islam at one point.
That's right.
But of course, I've had the spirit of hearing Dr. Ben. Keep in mind, that was I'm about now to make my journey to Africa. All right, so I made that journey to Africa with Dr. Ben in 1981, and I returned back. So when Khalid came to Marcus Garvey School to pick up his son, and I started to challenge Brother Khalid on some issues. All right, because of what I witnessed over there. Brother Khalid, he didn't fight against what I was saying, but what he did, he said, brother, I want you to come to the Nation, Temple number 27. I want you, at that time it was up on Stocker before it went down to Crenshaw, for those who know the LA area. I want you to come to the Nation and lecture on this. He opened the Nation, the mosque up for me.
So he was open to the teachings, even though the teachings might have contradicted or corrected earlier teachings.
Exactly. That brother was an African spiritual warrior. All right.
See, and that's what I'm talking about. That's what we need in our community. We need to have a willingness to grow and evolve the body of knowledge that we have by challenging previous assumptions and then correcting miseducation that's even perpetrated in our own community. We talk so much about miseducation. Exactly. Those are the types of leaders that we need. That's the spirit that we need in our community, because when you start discussing these things amongst the Hebrew Israelites, amongst hardcore, diehard Christians, or amongst those who have converted to Judaism, or whatever the case is, it's almost a violent response. It's almost a violent kind of resistance that you get from those brothers and sisters. And I think that's counterproductive. I don't know how you feel about that issue, but I think that's setting us back. It's doing more harm than good when we don't allow ourselves to evolve and correct right knowledge, or correct ourselves with right knowledge.
Well, I think that's where we have to open ourselves up to who we truly are. And like I said before, with Brother Khalid, he did not fight or rebel against some of the things I was saying. Like I said before, I was on the threshold of joining the Nation of Islam. But I mean,
that's right.
All true African men who want the freedom of African people are going to join, something that's strong and positive and showing strong black manhood. Okay, so that's where I was at that time. But of course, when Brother Khalid, when I came to him, and he saw the presentation, enjoyed the presentation, and asked me to come back repeatedly. Okay, not to stop. But not only that, he even asked Dr. Ben to come lecture at the mosque. That's right. The first time I actually saw L.A. united, black folks united. As long as you were teaching, if you were teaching a strong black theology, a strong black movement, as long as it was black and about us, Khalid opened up the doors to the mosque. And then as Khalid started to wear, he had his star and crescent, and he had an ankh in one hand and star and crescent on the other. So, he's a spiritual warrior now. And I used to, ask Brother Khalid, because Brother Khalid would call on El Demere, he would call on Ngai, he would call on Amma, Ptah, the various names of the African deity, depending on what period or where we are on the African continent.
That's right.
And then he would call on Allah, and I would joke with him. I would say, brother, how do you call on El Demere and Ngai, okay, among the Gikuyu people in Kenya, and Amma among the Dogon, and Ptah among the early period of Kemet, and Amma during the Middle Kingdom, and then you call on Allah. I said, how do you do that in the nation, brother? He said, brother, we are an African spiritual people. This is us. And these are the various names, and without us, there would be no name of a God.
That's right.
See, so that showed that Brother Khalid had opened to a high spirituality. In my personal opinion, I feel that, with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad creating a black theology, even though it had this Islamic thing in it, but it was still based off of a black theology from here, something that would work for us. And it still had room to grow into even evolve into a higher spiritual consciousness as we open up that African spirituality lying dormant. We could still work into our African spirituality and rise that whole spirit up. But once it becomes orthodox and once it becomes locked into the confines of just from Arabia, then we could never open up that African spiritual doorway, okay, because we get locked down to the dogma of the teachings of Arabia.
Do you think the Nation of Islam moved away from that following the death of
I'm not in the
Muhammad?
Nation of Islam. I'm not in the Nation of Islam, okay, to say that absolute, okay.
That's right.
But is my understanding, that there are certain areas that is going more orthodox, okay, but I'm just saying that the early teachings of the Elijah Muhammad, it provided the space to grow to that African spirituality because it was not locked within the orthodox coming from Arabia. As you know, the teachings of Elijah Muhammad was not based off of orthodox, Islam.
That's right.
All right. In fact, they said in Arabia that he was not teaching proper Islam. Well, I don't know.
Right.
Well, why are they fighting the Shiites and the Sunnis over there fighting and killing each other then? Which is okay if it's,
because both of them think that the other isn't teaching the proper Islam. Yeah, that's right.
Right, the whole idea of monotheism and one God all started with African people in the first place.
That's right.
All right, or whether we go back to Ptah or whether we go back to Amma, that idea. So the basis and foundation is that once we start to truly not to see our story, our spirituality within a circumference of 2,000 years, okay. Once we go back beyond these religions, we can see that whole spirituality was always there. All anthropological evidence has validated, as the leakies let it all leak out too, before they even looked at Africa as being the home of humanity, okay? They were looking all over the place. But when they came into Africa, they have not found no fossil evidence that humanity began somewhere else.
That's right. That hasn't stopped them from looking over the years.
Monogenetic origin starts right in Africa, okay? Now, so that means that the African man and woman was not walking around waiting for Asians and Arabs and Europeans for thousands, if not millions of years. When are you going to come here and teach us about God?
That's right.
When are you going to come here and teach us about all these things? We don't know what this is. If it was not for those early Africans, humanity would not even be on the planet Earth. They are the ones that observe terrestrial and celestial and spiritual forces of Mother Nature, the rising of the sun that became the resurrection, that the Europeans took and put that Serapis Jesus and put the sun behind his head and called him the Son of God. Okay, all this is all based off of the sun. So you mean to tell me that one would rather have a peckerwood Jesus, okay, and worship that than have the sun itself that gives life on this planet? Or will you go to those temples and see that our ancestors giving praise to the sun, and they're using the Zoop type to express that as the baboon. The baboon raises up and hollers when the sun rises in the east. So they saw that Zoop type, not worshiping the baboon, but the Zoop type of this baboon praising the sun. So they praised the sun. This is long before the Arabs did the Salat to the east with their praying to the east. All these ideas are documented on these books in stone. But if one becomes fanatical, okay, and through the hatred that Europeans have instilled in us so deeply about Africa, okay, then we don't want to accept it because we've been taught that it's pagan, it's heathen, and all of these negative things that all three of those religions from the Western point of view, through their teaching. I'm not talking from the black theology point of view. I'm talking about whether that's the white theology or the Asian theology point of view. All of them teach that it's pagan and heathen. They say that so we don't go look at where they stole these ideas from to make their religions.
They're hiding their crime.
Exactly. Hiding the crime. So that's why I will always have the highest respect for that grand master teacher warrior, Khalid Abdul Muhammad.
That's right.
He was a spiritual warrior, and understood, what we needed, and that's what we've got to come together on, So we've got, like I said, I have no problems with a brother dealing with a black theology, of Christianity, a black theology of the Hebrew faith, a black theology of Islam. Okay, but again, it's that black theology that's going to bring us to the black spirituality, which is the very foundation and the beginning, and stop us from fighting each other and realize that it comes from one source, and that's us in the first place.
It's us in the first place.
That's what we've got to look at.
True indeed.
My mother, peace be upon her, I didn't badger her when I awakened to this knowledge, and I grew up with a white Jesus on the wall. She had one above her bed.
That's right.
But she would come to my lectures, and she would see the lecture, and she would see, and I wouldn't say anything, and one day I came home, and she had a black Jesus on the wall, and she got rid of all the white figurines and everything. Now, what she sees now is her black divinity. I'm not going to argue with her about this black Jesus, okay, because that's her idea how she can relate to it, okay. I'm looking at she's connected to black divinity now.
That's right.
And through that black divinity, you can see your black spirituality now. And that's how we got to look at these religions and not let the dogma, okay, get caught up in it. After all, there's nothing like it on the planet Earth when you go back to Africa. There's no place on the planet Earth you can find the stories, okay, that's told on the temples and monuments and so forth, on and on and on and on.
That's right.
So when we look at the writings of the Bibles, if it was not for those early Purim Haru coming forth by day and by night, there would not be any Bibles. The King James Version. We would not have that, okay? You go to the pyramid text. Let's go to the pyramid text in Saqqara. It's there. We take groups every year. Okay, let's look at the coffin text where they wrote the spiritual salvation for your resurrection. Okay, let's look at the 123 feet long scrolls of papyrus where paper gets its name from, of the spiritual writings that's there. Okay, and let's go and see that long before the Torah we see these spiritual writings or the Pentateuch or the first 5 books of Moses, and then we're told in Hadith that the Prophet Muhammad is the one that got the whole story of writing the Quran. Okay, even though he didn't write it, but it came by way of Gabriel, the angel of the Lord. Well, the Gabriel, the angel of the Lord, is Tahuti, the letter Tahuti in ancient African spirituality.
True indeed.
Because Tahuti wrote the Pur, Haru, in Kemet with his fingers in red, by the way. And it says when Jesus speaks this in red, that idea came from there. But in the Hadith, we see that Gabriel is Tahuti. So they took from Tahuti to make Gabriel the angel of the Lord.
And there you have the ancient origins of Islam back in Africa, back in Kemet.
Back in Kemet. One account after the other. Account after the other.
So with all this being said, what should our brothers and sisters who are coming out of Christianity, coming out of Islam, coming out of Judaism, what should we be going back and studying? When we put down our Qurans and our Bibles, what should we go back and start studying? Because we can't take away the spiritual context that our brothers and sisters have coming out of the Christian church.
Right. I mean, it's not something that you take a rug and snatch it from under a person's, legs, okay? Right. And I think that, it's like going to a riverbank. You can start drinking the water from that point, but you can't say that's the beginning of the river. Even though the water, started from falls, thousands of miles upstream.
True indeed.
All right, but you can sit there and argue with anybody. Everybody sees the water. Everybody needs the water. All right, but that is not the beginning of the water, even though the water may be contaminated from, as it flows downstream, depending on what they're doing in the water. Okay, again, this is what we've got to look. We've got to look at the source. Okay, I respect all brothers, whether they be Muslims or whether they be Christians or whether they be Hebrew. As I said, and I'll say it again, if they're looking at it from their own black divinity or their own black spirituality and have no problems seeing that spiritual origins and not getting locked within that one box. Okay, so again, when I look at Rafik Bilal wrote a book, on I think it's called the Sacred Science, the Kemetic Sacred Science in Islam.
The Sacred Kemetic Science of Islam.
Exactly. Now, when I first picked up that book, okay, I think he wrote it in the 80s, okay, and when I first picked up that book back in the late 80s, I think, I have a lot of respect for him. Because here's a brother, even though he's a Muslim, he was able to go back and research and do a comparative analysis can validate that the spirituality of Islam goes back to the black man and woman thousands of years before it was in Arabia. And he had no problems with that because he was understanding the essence of his spirituality came from deep within his ancestors, thousands of years older than Islam. He didn't let the dogma, nor did he become fanatical, and to even start to make that approach to do that research to write that book, which I think is an excellent book.
And I'm looking it up right now. And for the listeners, we're going to include a link in the show notes to that book so they can all pick it up and check it out themselves. And in addition to that, I'm checking out your website, Kemet New Productions. So today, you and your wife, who's a master teacher in her own right, you both own and manage Kemet New Productions. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is? Because we're already an hour into this interview, and let me be honest. I had a set list of questions. I didn't hit half the questions, and I have 3 pages of notes. I have enough research to last me for the rest of the year from this one interview. We'll definitely have to do it again, and I want to be ready next time. I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of information that.
Sometimes I overtalk too, my brother.
No, it's a beautiful
my
thing.
My spirit gets into it as well. Yes,
you're doing us a great service, and all this information needs to be captured. We all need to go back and do our own research. With you serving as the motivator, you serving as the catalyst. So it's much appreciated, and we're truly blessed by your presence. But can you tell us a little bit more about Kemet New Productions? Because I know I can find a lot of this information there.
Well, Kemet New Productions literally means Black People Productions. And, carrying on the work and, just doing our piece and putting it together and continuing it. What Dr. Ben said, we got to go back and do the field research and literally continuing his work, peace be upon him, the Grand Master Teacher.
That's right.
He just had his transitional ceremony. In fact, it was last weekend.
That's right.
And I was back there for his transitional ceremony.
And I wasn't able to make it myself, but we did send a representative. Something else I came across. So Dr. Ben performed the wedding ceremony for you and your wife, speaking of.
Absolutely. Yeah, he absolutely did. In fact, Mary and I, we met on his tour. That's how we met. In fact, we have enough time, I can go real quick to tell the story, considering you mentioned that.
Please do. We got all the time you need.
Thank you, brother. 1991, I'm going through hard times and, rough period for me at that time. And I literally, on Dr. Ben's tour, walked through the Temple of Amun. The Temple of Amun is referred to as, our ancestors call it Ipit Rasut, the most select and holy of places in the House of Amun, which is called Karnak today, still the greatest temple on the planet Earth, where over 80,000 students matriculated through that temple. Spirituality, educational center, theology, and science, all taught right there, even where the Greeks got their knowledge at. Where one went to school for 40 years, even though the Greeks didn't. I think Pythagoras only made 22 years.
That's right.
But it was through that temple that I walked through the hypostyle hall, which are the greatest hypostyle hall on the planet Earth, 134 columns, 79 feet high, with an architectural structure of the church with the nave idea from there. And I called on Amun. I said, I've given praise to thee, I've given homage to thee, and now my enemies all around me, which the enemies were around me at that time. And I need a queen to be on my side. I did not want to make this journey all alone. And it was the following year, in 1992, Mary Ra and her family, her mother and father and brother, came on the trip. And her father, I befriended him. He's a warrior. He's a serious warrior. It's like he became my best friend. It's not like no even though he's much older than me, but no generation gap. And I got to know his daughter, and we started dating. I lived in Los Angeles, and she lived in Dallas at the time. And the following year, we returned back to Africa, and Dr. Ben did our marriage ceremony in the very temple that I asked for a queen to be on my side in 1991. So we have been now conducting the educational tours for many years now, and lecturing throughout the U.S. as well as Canada.
That's right.
The Caribbean and Europe, and as far away as Japan. So and conducting the educational tours to Kemet, Egypt in the summer, and Ethiopia in the winter. So we produce DVD. She's a lecturer as well. She has some powerhouse information, things that I've actually witnessed on the temples and tombs for years that she was able to see that I didn't see. So that's the importance of having that balance. In fact, she created the term netter hemp, Okay, well, she didn't create it. Take that back. She researched it. Okay, of the ancient Neter Netrius, meaning that Neter hemp means divine wife, and Neter hedge means divine husband. So she did the research on that. So we've been together now 23 years. And it's been a wonderful journey, and I'm truly living heaven on earth.
That's a beautiful
with her
thing.
on my side. So Amen has answered my prayers. Many people tell me, "Oh, Kwesi, well, my prayers haven't been answered." I say, you might have to ask a very critical question. You might be calling on the wrong God, because my prayers have been answered.
That's a beautiful thing. That's well said. That's well said. So how long has Kemet New Productions been active?
Yeah, well, Kemet New Productions started back in about 1984, when I started producing, at that time, VHS tapes. And
that's right.
And now, so this is a continuation of Kemet New Productions. Is not only producing it, it is now DVDs. Now this helps continue our research, and now it's part of the whole educational tours as well that we do. So if one goes to KEMETNU.com.
So you're going to be headed back to Kemet this year, one of those days?
Oh, definitely. This year is July 18th to August 1st. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
And Ethiopia is always at the end of December. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Why is that?
But yeah, the rain season in Ethiopia is a time we don't want to be over there. We want people to enjoy the trip. And so that's in December. You don't have the rain season. And also keep in mind, you can imagine when we say rain season, that's serious, because it's the rains from Ethiopia to enter Africa that creates that now. So without that now, there would never been in Egypt. So you can imagine the torrential downfall that comes from Lake Tana.
That's right.
The rains that carries that down the Blue Nile and meets up with the what is now referred to as the White Nile. So our ancestors called it Happy, and then it continues on and it flow into Egypt and not into the Mediterranean.
That's right. That's right. Now, you've been all over Kemet, you've been all over Ethiopia, but you've also been throughout the continent. So let me ask you this: have you ever thought about going back permanently?
Well, that's something that has come across my mind, and I think that the work that I'm doing, and because of the lecturing and the information, I think that the work I'm doing here is important right now. Even though I returned back to Africa, I was in Uganda last year. I lectured at Kampala University, and many of the students equally wanted me to stay there. Okay,
that's right.
To help disseminate, to educate, to liberate. Because keep in mind that. The same condition that Africa is facing, we're facing over here. That we're facing over here, Africa is facing as well.
Absolutely right.
That's a reality.
Absolutely right. And the difference is we have access to technology. I mean, you can go up the street to a public library and access YouTube videos that'll give you years upon years of education and background on some of the things we discuss. Many of our brothers and sisters over there don't have access to that. And so while we complain that we are in a condition of miseducation, a lot of our brothers and sisters over there are decades behind us, unfortunately. And they're right there on the continent. They're right there at the source.
Right, and that's that you have one advantage where they're at the source, and as long as you have if they have not been contaminated by the European missionaries,
that's
which
right.
are still causing a devastation on the African continent. As long as they haven't been affected by the missionaries, the brothers and sisters have taken the resources that they have, and they have used them very well.
That's right.
Keep in mind, when you're in a revolutionary mindset, you can take very little and make a lot out of it.
That's right.
Just like us over here, we're not in a revolutionary mindset, so we have a lot at our disposal, but because of our unconsciousness to the revolutionary mindset, we have stuff that's right in front of our face, that's right at our fingertips, but we're not thinking from that revolutionary mindset and of education for liberation, and above all, liberation for our African people.
That's right.
So when you're not in that mindset, knowledge can be right in front of you. It don't mean anything. You got knowledge all over the computer. I call it the Kraken-net, because that's what it is.
It is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just madness on there. We're on there doing all kind of things. Okay, but trying to mobilize around the liberation of African people. So that's the importance of having a revolutionary mindset.
True indeed.
That all this that we have here, can you imagine the explosion in taking this resource and using it a proper way? Because I've seen brothers and sisters. I mean, let's look at Houston Dungy and her book, the Kushite Empire. She didn't have computers when she wrote that book.
That's right.
Back in the 1930s, and we think of the resources that brothers and sisters even had here at an early period, okay, and what they were able to do. That tells us that we should be doing light years work right now.
Exponentially more.
Exactly, but they keep us with things to do so we don't have time to think. So, that's the whole strategy. They're going to put information out there, and that's one thing about white supremacy. They want to make sure that their information is there, not for us and for us to think about liberation, but for their own system of white supremacy.
Exactly, and to maintain that
but
system of
white
white
supremacy. But they got to keep the Negro mind confused. Watching television and using gadgets and everything else, and look how convoluted the computer is. There's a lot of information on there.
That's right.
But it's so convoluted, it's easy to get detoured away from the information that you're dealing with, relating to yourself, that is.
True indeed. Well, from the position that we're at, and from your position as both a melanated man and a master teacher of our people, what should our strategy be going forward? And I think this is a good question to cap this interview off. From now into the future, what path should we be walking?
I think that right now we've got to break the gravitational pull of white supremacy. We've got to start to think outside of their white supremacy diameter. Okay. Our whole psychic, okay, is locked within whether it's their religious beliefs, okay, or whether it's their Western civilization. Everything is locked within that world. Now, if we don't know Imhotep, and if we walk down the street, every black man and woman and child should know Imhotep.
That's right.
Just like they would know the Serapis Jesus, or whether they would know the Socrates or Plato. They know all these people.
That's right.
Or King James. They know these people. They know all the people within that 2,000 years circumference of white supremacy. But when we start to talk about great monuments and temples and places that exist and names of the great heroes and churros and sages of our people and carved head priests and all those who did these things thousands of years, we don't know this. So the number one thing that we've got to do is start to break the diameter of white supremacy thinking.
That's right.
True, and that's what our ancestors meant by knowing thyself, okay?
True indeed.
So that's the important. That's the Burdett. That's the symbol of the Burdett of know thyself is the Burdett. That's the symbol. It's the sun to swing over all the temples. And that's empowerment in self, because I think when we go into that spiritual consciousness and awakening to that third eye, then now we come into the whole third eye and the opening of the pineal gland that they taught.
That's right.
You see, so what is the lyrics on our children? So many things that we're talking here. There's a whole other topic on it within itself. How do they keep us on that low nature? How do they keep us, from rising up that whole spiritual consciousness to bring out that third eye, which is activated through the sun and the sun this wing, but yet our whole consciousness of that is a white angel. As sad as it is. So there's so much. I think that the fear of white supremacy, knowing that this whole these spiritual forces are lying dormant in us, and once they are activated, that's when we start to move light years beyond this whole white supremacy time period.
And it is written, and so shall it be done. Master Teacher Ashra Kwesi, this has been an absolute honor. It's been a pleasure. I've been literally stunned for most of the interview. I said I had a list of questions, but I'm sitting over here, I'm taking notes, and new questions are popping up as I'm taking notes on the topics that you're brushing on. And so we want to invite you back to do another episode of United Black America Radio. And also this August, you are going to be one of our featured presenters at the Pan-African Congress. Is that right?
We're going to do it's going to be my Nectar Hemp, Mary Ron and Ira Nectar Hedge. We'll be lecturing together there. And in fact, right. I'll be dealing with the Nile Valley civilization, and she'll be dealing with Ethiopia, occupied but never colonized. So she has a powerful presentation on the whole Pan-African movement during that period.
That's right.
It's one of my favored by her. So I'm always elated when both of us are lecturing together, because sometimes I may go out and she doesn't go out, and I feel really very lopsided.
That's
so I'm
right.
very much honored that the Pan-African Congress organization has invited both of us to come. So we definitely look forward for that period. And we'll be fresh from Kemet too. So we'll have a little fire. We'll have a little fire under us.
That's right. The honor is absolutely all ours. And for our listeners, we're going to include links to all of the topics that our brother Ashra Kwesi has touched on during this interview, all the books that he's recommended. We're going to have direct links to his website as well as information on how you can attend the Pan-African Congress. Again, Master Teacher, it's been our absolute honor, and we're going to go ahead and schedule another interview. I'm going to be giving you a call soon, and we'll talk about how we can make that happen, because we could just focus on one aspect of some of the topics that you've talked about.
I was about to say that, right. We can just focus on particular issues on the topics, and we can definitely do that for the future.
That's right. So we'll consider this an introduction. And, personally, I want to thank you for your service, because your contributions to the community are immeasurable. I've come across so many brothers and sisters, and I get an opportunity to talk to people from all walks of life, our people from all walks of life, conscious, unconscious, and, of all the names that come up, yours is right up there with Sheikh Anta Diop, with our master teacher and ancestor, peace.
Oh, they got big shoes. They got real big shoes for me, brother.
Hey, you right there with them. You right there with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of wobble in but I'm most honored. But they are the grand master teachers. And without them, I definitely would not be doing what I'm doing. And I definitely have to humble myself to those warrior scholars who've made so many of us cubs out here be who we are.
And as you to them, so we are to you. We're really in your debt. So if you don't hear it on a daily basis, thank you. Thank you for members of the community, because there are a lot of us out there, and all we do is consume, and we demand, and we seek out master teachers, and we try and drain them dry without paying homage to them and without carrying on that work. And so that's what you're doing. That's leadership by example. I encourage all of you, kemetnew.com. Go there. Pick up this intellectual legacy that this master teacher is leaving behind for us. Make sure you are supporting him financially, not just in word, but in deed. It's important that we keep our black businesses alive. It's important that we pay homage to our master teachers with our dollars, with our cents, and with our words. And so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and cap off the interview. Again, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again.
Asante Sana, brother, and appreciate you. Definitely, it was great being on here, and look forward to the future.